one area we have a little bit of a disagreement is in terms of white privilege, kind of the definition. So as Jordan Peterson puts it, kind of navigating the tragedy of existence. With that being said, the majority of positions of authority are statistically held by people that are white. And just kind of going off of that, as if a person of color is navigating the tragedy of their existence in terms of that's basically how it is for all of us navigating a tragedy of existence, they're statistically more likely to encompass somebody that would be racist. So with that being said, how is that not a semblance of white privilege? And the solution is still better preparing the individual, but do you think acknowledging that as a definition of white privilege is a good idea in terms of encouraging discussion?
Well, I think that it would be good if the other side would agree to it. So if we're going to use your definition of white privilege, which is that if you're a black person wandering through society, you're more likely to be victimized by white racism than a white person walking through society. That's obviously statistically true. I hesitate to use a term coined by the left because I think that what ends up happening is that I use the term in the way you're using it, and then they assume that I agree with them, that all inequalities are due to discrimination, which is the way they mean it. What they mean is that everything that's bad that happens in society is due to some shadowy white privilege out there, and the only way that we can fight that is by having the white people sit down and shut up. And that I disagree with entirely. So, I have these conversations with folks on the left all the time. What I always find is useful is to try and define terms. And what do you mean by white privilege? Because, sure, I'll acknowledge that you're less likely to be victimized for racist purposes by random white people in society if you're white than if you're black. But if you're talking about widespread government policy, for example, you can easily make the case the other way. Right? If you're making the case in terms of affirmative action, the fact is that if you are Asian, you are much more likely to be targeted by admissions officers than if you're black. And that is that black privilege? I wouldn't say that's black privilege. I would say that that's a bad law. The idea of white privilege, that you inherently have an easier life in the United States by dint of the color of your skin, I just don't buy that, and I think that's what the left actually means by this. And I think that's why they apply it too broadly. Because if you want to say that this individual black person has a rougher life than this individual white person, sure, go ahead, that's great. But if you want to say that Colin Powell's son somehow has it easier than the child of a meth addict in Central California who happens to be white, no, I'm not going to grant you that.
Okay, can I respond?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So just kind of going off of that in terms of, because you boil it down to the individual, with which I entirely agree with, in terms of individuals regardless of race can experience different levels of tragedy going through life. But with that being said, I think we're in agreement that the best way to kind of rectify that is to better prepare the individual. I'm curious what you think the best way of doing that is.
Yeah, as I say before, I think that the best way to navigate life is to make a series of good decisions. And making good decisions in the face of whatever situation you have is the best way for you to have a good life, particularly in a free society. Now again, because I'm in the business of politics, Jordan is in the business of psychology. I'm in the business of politics. That means that I spend an awful lot of my time trying to determine what societal rules should apply. Well, my usual take is if the societal rule has a disparate impact, but is not actually designed to be disparate, then I'm not going to grant you the premise that it is a racist rule. And this is where we get into trouble. This is why Jordan and I end up having basically the same solution, which is life's tough, grow a set, right? That's Jordan's basic routine, right? Go clean up your room. That's what I've been saying, for years. We say the same thing. If you're not making responsible decisions and then your life turns out poorly, that is not my fault. If you're making responsible decisions and you can point me to a situation where somebody has stood in your way out of bigotry or for any other reason that's illegitimate, then I'll stand next to you and I'll fight that person because I think that person ought to be fought.